What is going on, people? It is so good to have you on board. It is another episode of Unfiltered coming your way right here, right now. Officially, this will go down in your scorecard, episode number 307. You can jump on board 24/7, 365. It is easy. Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcasts. Of course, the artist formerly known as Twitter, X, if you will, at Casey Stern. Get up into the bio, and that's where you follow through and get to Unfiltered with Casey Stern over on Instagram. Same thing on the YouTube channel. And now you can get the first episode of the new podcast I'm doing, Believe in Mets, for the Believe Network. Jim Duquette was my guest. That went out today. Go subscribe, get all that content, and get the videos on that at the YouTube channel for Unfiltered for now, at least, as well. So a lot going on there. A lot going on here. Going to kind of bounce around today. So we'll get into, as I do this on a Monday, the beginning of free agency for the NBA and the NHL. I want to talk about some of the news and notes there. I'll begin once we get into this with Major League Baseball, some news and notes on the MLB side, a little bit of smorgasbord for everything. If you're an MLB fan, you get that. You want to fast forward, NHL or NBA, you do that well if you're watching or listening to this live before it gets put up on the podcast, whether it be on Facebook or on Instagram or on Twitter. Then, therefore, you'll have to sit and wait. But you could wait for this, the fact that we, as always, are presented by our good friends at Bet Online, your number one source for your sports betting needs this season. They've got baseball, golf, soccer, all the top fights in the UFC, MMA, and boxing, every stat, every matchup, live odds, and spreads when all the games are being played. When the game's over, you get over to the online casino. You got blackjack or poker. You can unwind with over 150 slot games. So get over the website today. Get in on the action. Use the promo code BELIEVE. Get a 50% free bet credit on your first deposit for up to $250. It is Bet Online. The game starts here. So now that we've paid off the sponsor, let's pay off all the information. Let's talk about baseball first, okay? And I want to do free agency last because I want to get into that a little bit. And something I always talk about when I think about the day at the beginning of July, in addition to it being Bobby Bonilla Day, when we think about the feelings of energy that you get in the other two sports for free agency that you don't get in the lukewarm stove of baseball. But let me bounce around on a few things first, okay? The home run derby. Now, I might be alone on an island here. I saw the rule changes, and they're fine. I know that they want to decrease the pace. They want to make sure that, players stop complaining. They want to have the best hitters go ahead and be involved in it. They don't want any teams to complain about hitters being involved in it, so that's great. So you get the max of 40 pitches. You got the bonus time, which is no longer clocked. You've got the first round not a head-to-head, so you get kind of the top four that get in, almost like the three-point competition. That's fine. The question that I have for you, and I'm curious on Twitter, or you want to lock in after you listen to the podcast, Apple, Spotify, wherever you are, and get in on the YouTube channel or write me a DM and let me know. Does anybody care? I almost said something else with an expletive because maybe it's because I covered so many home run derbies, but I don't really give a crap about the home run derby. It does nothing for me. Like, watching guys hit home runs is great. And there's the occasional thing where they go on some sort of a run. And I know right now people are going to be throwing tomatoes at the screen and giving me a lot of crap. Go ahead and at me. It's fine. But I don't understand what the big deal is. I would much rather have a skills competition. I've always said this. And the NHL has kind of botched a little bit the skills competition. We know what the slam dunk competition is not, because you don't have Vince Carter, you don't got Michael Jordan, you don't got Kobe Bryant, you don't have any of that anymore. I understand that, right? So they've tried to get creative with that skills competition, if you will. But give me outfielders throwing to targets at third base and have those targets all be for charity. $1,000 to this one, $10,000 to this one. You hit the furthest one, it's $100,000. Now, you can't do that because the teams don't want them blowing their arms out. And that's why you also can't do a 40-yard dash, or how fast we could see. Not, he's not healthy right now, but Mookie Betts run from first to third. Can you give me some of that? Inject that the hell into my veins before you give me the home run derby. I'm sorry. Because we forget about the athleticism in baseball, and that's the part I love. It's the speed and the power. I'm fine with the home run derby being there, but this idea that, like, we got to tweak it and all these things that we've done over the years, and I covered so many of them. And look, I'm not sitting there. I was blessed enough to be on the field during I know what he is now, but during the Josh Hamilton home run derby, and that was like a big deal. And I was sitting right there when it happened, and that was amazing. Old Yankee Stadium, all of that. We've had some moments. Okay, I got to interview Robinson Cano after his dad threw to him. His dad was crying. There were some great moments I got to cover and see, and that we've seen all from home. But, look, it's a PG show. I was saying, who gives a shit? Really? Do we? Does anybody really care about the home run derby? Is it just me? Maybe I'm out on an island with that. I'm curious. Let me know. Because honestly, as I'm sitting there watching like all the rule tweaks, I'm like, okay, like this is great, but like I just don't care. Like I just don't really know who cares about the home run derby anymore. Want to bounce around the league a little bit. Couple things. First of all, pumped to see James Wood, who will debut tonight for the Nationals. That Soto deal, we go back to, and now kind of, Padre fans trying to figure out what this Soto deal will look like. But that Soto deal that put him in San Diego, look, Abrams and Mackenzie Gore have become, big time pieces, obviously, for DC, who's had a nice season. Davey Martinez done a good job to even keep that team even anywhere close to the 500 mark. But Wood, a 6'7" outfielder, 21 years old, dynamic talent. People rave about him in terms of that most important tool, which is the one between the ears. Looking forward to seeing his debut. We are not giving enough credit to a number of things. First, let's start the AL Central. The AL Central has three teams that, defy all odds. You got no Shane Bieber, for the Guardians. And here they are, 50-32 as I do this on a Monday. And in first place, and right there on the heels of the Orioles and the Yankees for best record in the American League. You got the Twins and the Royals, and all three of these teams are sitting there, and they, look, I get it, get some pieces like Correa. You don't spend a lot of money in terms of in totality comparatively to some of the other teams who have wasted money all over their rosters and don't do anything with it. And here are these teams that are squeezing the most that they can out of the orange. You got great stories. You got young players in all of them. Of course, Witt Jr. at the front end of that. But all three of these teams now, for me, very, very interesting heading into the trade deadline to see who's going to push that pedal, because that whole prospects are cool, parades are cooler thing is great when you got money. It's great when you got other prospects and you don't care about guys that you control as much, because you can go ahead and you can give it up a little bit. But we've seen these teams go. We've seen Cleveland when they were the Indians, when they were there, when they got a chance to get to the World Series, go and push the pedal down, spend tons of money, and spend money on rentals. We saw it with the Royals. What do you think about Edinson Volquez at the time, or Johnny Cueto for three controllable left-handers as a rental when they knew that he was gone, among other moves, and some didn't work. You had Rios and Kedrys Morales and others. I don't remember them all going back to that time period, that 2015, 2016 area, right? But you're looking at these teams and they've done it before. I'm really curious to see who in that Central going to push that pedal and take this opportunity. We talked about the Orioles last year, and I've said really not doing enough. No offense, Jack Flaherty. Don't know what Verlander would have done. Don't know what Scherzer would have done. We know what they did and didn't end up doing. Latter and former, right? For the teams that they went to, but really curious to see what happens now with these teams in the Central. We're not giving enough credit to Joe Espada and the job he has done, and a hell of a job. That Astros team, people putting them out to pasture. You got Jose Abreu who gets released after getting demoted. You got all these guys. I mean, Presley and Hader and everything that it was supposed to be with Abreu, the best 7, 8, 9 on paper in all Major League Baseball. And it was a joke for the really the majority, the first month and a half of the season. Teams sitting there 10, 12 games under 500. They ain't got no shot. Luke is in that division. Seattle was playing well, and Texas was still there and relevant at the time. My gosh, what's happened to them? 8, 9 now under the 500 mark. But you got to give a ton of credit to what the Astros have done. Game over 500, 9 out of 10. Forget about a wild card position. They're 3.5 games out of first place still in the American League West. Where we don't give credit is the National League wildcard race, because I'm here to tell you that none of these teams are good. The good news and bad news, okay? The bad news is none of them are good. The good news is if you root for one of them, you got a chance. You're saying there's a chance, right? And Dumb and Dumber, you're saying there's a big chance. There's a chance if you're the Mets, and certainly if you're in it, not trading Pete Alonso, you're adding bullpen help, probably adding a starter, at least back of the rotation, somebody, even though you're not going to give up much. Maybe just spend money, do it in a rental, not give up prospects, but you're going to do something probably to add. You look at where the Cardinals are to try and hold the position they're in. Cubs sitting there, 6, 7 games under 500. They've been a disaster, but they're still hanging around just 4 or 5 games out of a wild card spot. And my God, I mentioned the Mets. What are they, a game ahead of the Pittsburgh Pirates, 2 ahead of the Nationals? None of these teams are good, which means, again, always talk about this every year, This is where men separate from boys in this sport. We are going to get into a part where you're going to have to figure, do you know what, or you get off the pot? Because if you're sitting there and you're pushing and going for it, you're going to have to do that as we get closer to the deadline. If you're not, and you're kind of cutting bait and realizing, okay, well, we're not that good, so we don't want to push too far. We don't want to go ahead and give up too much money, even if it's a rental. We don't want to give up prospect value, right? Certainly, because we know that's important, especially to teams not spending money. I mentioned in Pittsburgh, for example, right? Could be really interesting to see what those teams do. Now let's get the free agency and use it as a tie-in, get NHL, NBA. And your thoughts, as always, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. You can write in reviews there. Get the notes on Twitter or X at Casey Stern. Give me a follow if you haven't already. And again, check out the new pod, Believe in Mets, as well, if you are a Met fan, leaving them out of this for the most part. I know I mentioned Alonso, poo-poo, sorry. Free agency in Major League Baseball has been bad for a long time. It has not been the hot stove for a long time. Every time that I covered while working at Turner, the free agent frenzy, and was there on the desk during those hours at NBA TV, all I kept thinking as a guy who at the time was covering baseball for 2 decades was, give me some of this. Like, how the hell do we get this? You know how many winter meetings I was at where nothing happened? I've talked about this before in this podcast. I remember when winter meetings started and I covered it and I'd be on the air and I would literally do, people who worked with me could verify. I would take a pad like this and I would write 1, 2, 3, and I would write the team name on the left and I would number all the deals, the smallest deal, the biggest deal. So at the end of every day, I can go ahead and pay off and read like every deal that happened. And it took like, I got to leave 5 minutes left in the show. I got 4 pages. Then we got to the point where I got like 3 moves that are made. And please, can you bring me more guests? I'll go talk to the guy sitting there serving coffee across the way at the restaurant in the hotel because there ain't nothing going on. And when you get the pomp and circumstance out of the free agency like you get in basketball in the NBA or like you get in the NHL with hockey, we miss that. Now, we can't have it because we understand there's no salary cap. And for those who don't, I'm not going to delve fully into that. If you don't get that, you could probably figure it out common sense wise. But clearly, you can't go ahead and put the clamps on and the deadlines in that way. But you can start it later, start an open free agency at winter meetings, even if it's a dumb moratorium like it is in the NBA, where we know that a lot of deals are in, where we hear about guys who agree and then all of a sudden it gets announced. That's fine. At least you put guys up at the podium and we're starting winter meetings and boom, you're on the air at MLB Network or ESPN or wherever, and you've got 9, 10 deals and guys who are in there at whatever the site may be. But you don't have any of that. You don't have anything. You're just sitting there and you're slow, kind of hazy and waiting around. It's like, the Jack Johnson tune, sitting, waiting, wishing. That's basically what you're doing for something to happen most of the time. Wish it wasn't that way. It's not that way in these two sports. Let me quickly touch the NHL because I got more on the NBA. And I could do a ton of NHL, a diehard hockey guy, Islander logo ahead of me if you're listening and you're not watching, right? But I got to say this because I got love for Barry Trotz. I got love for Barry Trotz like he's an uncle I never had. I got love for Barry Trotz because he gave me 2 of the greatest runs of any sport as a fan that I have been in my whole life, and I'm going to be 46 years old in October. He gave me 2 runs that meant a lot to me in my life, and one of those 2 runs that I went through at the worst time I've ever had in my life. And those runs, and even though they were oh so close and didn't win the cup, and were right there in a game 7, and I was ready to go back to Long Island if they got there to go to the final, those things mean a lot. Barry Trotz, love him forever. I'll never understand Lou Lamoriello. No offense to the Duclair signing today and Mike Riley returning. Okay, woot woot, and it's fine. I think Duclair's fine. But at the end of the day, you getting rid of Barry Trotz is crazy. Love Patrick Waugh coming in. I think it's going to be great, but I don't understand that. Why am I bringing this up? If you're not an NHL fan, Barry Trotz, once the longtime coach of the Nashville Predators, then won the cup with Washington, was very close to doing so with New York with the Islanders, and then went back into now front office back with Nashville. And holy hell, Steven Stamkos, 4 hours. Jonathan Marchessault, how many moments that guy had in his time in Vegas, including a cup? 5 years. Brady Shea, 7 years. They inked Saros, their star goaltender, to an 8-year deal. I mean, this is Barry Trotz's world. We all living in it in the NHL today in free agency day 1 as the Nashville Predators went from like, okay, like they sort of got some young players and fine to wow. And now you think about in free agency now the next couple of days, these important players, these third, fourth liners, these sixth, seventh defensemen, these depth players, these pieces that are the meaning of everything. Look at how Florida is built. Where'd Kyle Okposo come from? They got him at the end of the season, and he was a captain of another team and then barely played, right? Got to win a cup, and I'm happy for Okie that he did that as a former Islander. But those depth moves, those guys are so important. Who's not thinking about going to Nashville now to go join this group, thinking about what they've done, to go battle with the Edmontons and the Dallases and some of these other teams? So give a lot of credit to the Preds. They have owned NHL free agency day one. Let's get to the NBA. And I got to start before we get to today because I haven't commented on it yet. And I'm a diehard Knick fan. I'm Mikal Bridges. I don't like Villanova. I never liked Villanova. I grew up a diehard St. John's fan. The 30 for 30 on the Big East makes me cry. I can't imagine what happened to it, but I remember the days. Raleigh Massimino and Lou Carnesecca and John Thompson and those three teams. Was that 85 being in the Final Four? Someone's going to correct me. Was it 86? I think it was 85. Those three teams both all being in the Final Four, and what the Big East was. And I love Jay Wright, Long Island guy. He was Hofstra before that, and I met him, got to interview him a couple of times, had him on set at one of our drafts that we did on NBA TV. Great dude. But I don't really like Villanova. But now I love Villanova. It's fine. Like, I've always associated with Philly, kind of not my thing being a New York fan. Sorry, but now I'm all in because this team, holy hell. Now, clearly, we're set up because you're a Knick fan for a disaster of epic proportions. Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria, Ghostbusters 2, where the ooze is going to come out of Vigo like in the painting, because as a Knick fan, you just don't get good things. You don't get to be happy. Your glee, I always joke, right? The light at the end of the tunnel, going to be a train at some point. But holy crap, this is the best setup they have had. And I understand where they just were. And I know how close they were. And I'm sorry, I don't think they were going to beat the Celtics. But you give me a healthy Brunson and you tell me OG is healthy. And I'm not even mentioning Randall. You tell me Brunson's healthy. You tell me OG is healthy. You tell me Hart stays healthy. Right? So you go back to like where we were somewhere in the first round of the playoffs. And you look at the way that team was playing. They could have taken the Celtics to 6 or 7 games easily and made that a very difficult series. But here's the thing. That's how close they were to Boston. Team now, by the way, up for sale. Tatum with the biggest contract ever. Congratulations to him. But that's how close the Knicks were to the Celtics. Now, you're telling me that they're bringing in Mikal Bridges and his shooting and his defense and his energy to what you've already got with the growth of Dante. We've already got, obviously, with Jalen at the forefront of that. And, you know, where Julius Randle, does he fit in still into all of that? You brought back OG at 200 mil plus. Are you kidding? Because when they brought Mikal in, I'm like, all right, so OG not coming back. And this is fine. Like, we'll be in a really good spot, right? Kel could do more things offensively. He's a greater threat. You kind of not necessarily the same guy in terms of length and defense, but sort of there. Look at what the hell they got now. And then today came, and a little bit of, you know, probably a little more than a little bit, if we're being fair, a bite in the ass with losing Hartenstein going for 3 years to Oklahoma City. Because Isaiah had, first of all, happy for this dude, because nobody was giving him any credit. Nobody thought worth a lick of him. I remember seeing him and doing games with Greg Anthony in Summer League, and him playing, I think it was on the Rockets at the time, and getting like Summer League minutes and having no idea who he was. And you look at what this guy did. A lot of people didn't know who he was until the middle of the season when they saw, holy crap, this guy's on the stat sheet in all kinds of different ways. I'm not comparing him with Draymond Green, but doing those kind of things at the center position in terms of the fact that he was always finding loose balls, continuing plays, all those things that don't show up in points. Really good passer, understands the offensive side of it, little bit of touch in the paint as much as he needs to have. To lose him is going to be a big loss, especially when Mitchell Robinson seems to never be able to stay healthy. And when he gets in a groove, he seems to find himself grooving into the IR, DL, IL. I can't even remember in the NBA which one they call it at this point. So a little bit of worried about the Hartenstein thing, but all in on the Knicks. Now let's get to free agency today. I want to hit 2 big things that came out because there are a lot of moves. Klay Thompson being in another jersey is crazy. It makes sense because he's 34 years old. It makes sense because last year he ended up playing some games off the bench, even though he averaged, I think, 16, 17 points, somewhere around there a game. Maybe it was a little more than that. Not the shooter he used to be. Got down, I think, to like 37% from three-point land this year. He hasn't been as effective since the injury. He's not the same guy. And at 34, with all the miles that he has, can't really be the same guy. But it's one of those things after watching the Warriors and the Dubs for all those years that it has got to be just painstaking. It is like watching it again, not comparing players, not the player Emmitt Smith was in the NFL, but I remember, and I hate the Cowboys, but I remember watching Emmitt Smith in an Arizona Cardinal jersey and talking to friends of mine who are Cowboy fans, being like, what the hell is that like to watch? Keith Hernandez was on the Cleveland Indians at one point, right? Mike Piazza on the San Diego Padres. Just thinking about things in my life that were difficult to watch after long, storied careers. And to think about what Klay Thompson did in the championships and everything that he was, and in that backcourt and the Splash Brothers and all of that, obviously you reflect on it positively and warmly if you're a Warriors fan, but still at the same time, that's got to be painful to watch. Now, the question is, what about the fit? And I think it is a fantastic one. I've never been a fan of Kyrie Irving in terms of some of the stuff off the court, but this year he kind of won me back over again because it just stayed on the court. It stayed about his talent, and he's an otherworldly talent. It stayed about his ability to take over the game. That was their cover in a finals where he hit the biggest shot. LeBron didn't when they came back down 3-1. And nothing against LeBron, is what it is. My opinion, just my own opinion, second best player to ever live. But it is what it is. Kyrie Irving could take over like almost nobody in this game. You got 4 or 5 guys who could do what he could do, and one is his own teammate in Doncic. But to bring in a motivated Klay Thompson, not getting paid really a lot of money. What is it, $350? It's not a lot, especially in NBA terms. I mean, look at some of the money that's being passed out. But to go ahead and take this role on this team, he's going out there to prove himself that he's still got it. He wants to be that piece that can push this team over the edge. They desperately need three-point shooting on that team. And when you think about all the attention that Doncic and Kyrie get, the amount of open shots that Klay Thompson's going to get, if his shooting could just be anywhere near what even it's been at 37, but if he can get back to kind of where he's been, right? And it just go and do what you do, defend and be active on that side of the ball, but be a shooter. They need a shooter desperately, going to be a great fit. Hate to see great fits in Philadelphia, and I'm not sure whether or not this is going to be one yet because everything that happens with the Sixers seems to go the wrong way. But to add to a star like Maxey and what we know Embiid is, especially when he's healthy enough, a guy like PG and Paul George, that's a big deal. 4 years, $212 million. Now let's see what happens. Because here's a guy himself who has been through, and look, give him a ton of credit, a tremendous talent, amazing career, but he's battled through injuries that, I mean, you go back to when that injury in Indiana, it was amazing, remarkable, whatever adjectives you want to put. He was even back on the floor doing what he was doing, and he still had to battle now all the time, seemingly, and been up against it with the health. That's got to be a concern. However, outside of that, should be a good fit. Clearly going to add a lot in terms of what he can do defensively. We know it takes a lot of pressure off Embiid. He's going to be a great guy. You think about the opportunities in the pick and roll that they already had, and you think about now adding Paul George, could be a really good fit for the Sixers again, based on his health. What are your thoughts? Day one, deadline, NHL. Day one, deadline, NBA. What we can do with free agency, thoughts heading into the All-Star break and towards the trade deadline in MLB. You can bring them all to me. It is easy. At Casey Stern, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Get the 2 Unfiltered with Casey Stern. If you're a Met fan, now you can get Believe in Mets. Jump on the YouTube channel. Hit me up on Instagram. And whatever you do, wherever you are, be blessed and be grateful for what you got. And stop people thinking about all the time what you don't. There's too much negativity everywhere. Go ahead and be happy this evening, wherever you may be. We are always happy to say that we are presented by our